In the affluent district on the west side of the city, where every car parked in front of a store cost no less than six figures, Tiger Crest Golf stood tall as a symbol of prestige and refinement. This was not merely a sporting goods store. It was a place where the wealthy displayed their taste, social status, and sophistication in the noble sport of golf. The entire storefront was made of reinforced glass, reflecting the glow of the luxury brands across the street. Inside, the decor featured imported leather furnishings, walnut wood flooring, and each golf club was displayed like a piece of jewelry in its own glass case. Here, customers weren't just buying clubs. They were buying the feeling of living in a world beyond the reach of others. The man in charge of Tiger Crest Golf's flagship store was Richard Devereaux, a well-groomed man in his 40s, always dressed in tailored Italian suits and polished leather shoes. He was more than just a manager. He was the gatekeeper of the elite. Richard believed he could read a person simply by their wristwatch or how they pronounced the word Titleist. He took pride in never serving the wrong kind of customer. To Richard, anyone who walked into the store without driving a luxury sports car or wearing designer clothing was simply wasting both their time and his. That was why Richard had a habit of assessing customers the moment they stepped through the door. A woman dressed in pristine white golf attire, carrying a Louis Vuitton bag, a guaranteed VIP, a man in a worn-out cap, wrinkled shirt, and faded shoes, probably better off grabbing a coffee somewhere more affordable. However, Tiger Crest Golf was not just Richard. Among the staff was Emma, a young woman in her mid-20s who had been working there for less than a year. Emma didn't come from wealth, but she had loved golf since childhood. Not because her father was a professional golfer or designer, but because her grandfather used to be a security guard at a local golf course. He used to tell her about the dreamlike swings, the strange silence over the lush green fairways, and how a player's character was revealed in every shot they took. Emma grew up with a deep love for a sport she never had the money to play, but she understood one thing well. Golf was a game of respect. Even though she couldn't play, she read books, watched training videos, and even picked up techniques from customers every day. In her eyes, every person who walked through the store had a story worth listening to, regardless of their wealth, style, or social standing. More than once, Emma was reprimanded by Richard for being too kind. "Did you help some old man with a canvas bag look for a golf club yesterday?" Richard asked, frowning. "Yes. He was looking for a hybrid club suited for weaker hands," Emma replied. Richard scoffed. "Weaker hands? More like a weak wallet. Do you think this store is a charity?" Emma didn't respond. She simply bowed her head. But deep inside, she knew she wasn't wrong. That morning, a light drizzle fell like mist. The delicate raindrops coated the store's glass facade, making the lights inside appear softer, more diffused. The atmosphere was quiet. Most VIP customers preferred to visit at noon when the sun was out, avoiding even the slightest splash of water on their luxury vehicles. Emma was arranging a display shelf when the glass door revolved slightly. A man stepped inside. He wore beige khakis, a faded gray polo shirt, and worn-out white sneakers. A dark-colored baseball cap was pulled low over his face, almost obscuring his features. No expensive bag, no luxury watch, just a slow, slightly hunched posture and eyes hidden beneath the brim of his cap. Calm, unrushed. Emma lifted her head from behind the display counter. Her gaze remained gentle, yet deep within, an unusual curiosity stirred. The man walking in didn't resemble the usual clientele. No sleek suits, no gleaming Rolex. He wore a worn-out earth-tone polo, frayed khakis, and a cap pulled low enough to conceal most of his face. Yet his gait, unhurried, composed, and silent, carried an inexplicable allure. "How may I help you, sir?" Emma's voice was as light as a breath, but warm enough to break the surrounding silence. The man didn't answer right away. He simply gave a slight nod before wandering deeper into the store, as if stepping into a museum of his past. He didn't glance at the price tags, nor did he seem interested in the gleaming, high-end clubs displayed in glass cases. His eyes lingered on each golf club as if greeting an old friend. A hand brushed lightly over a super light graphite shaft, a design specifically made for those with weaker grip strength, but requiring precision. From a distance, Richard had already taken note of everything. He sat behind the cashier's counter, sipping an espresso while furrowing his brows, as if the mere presence of this man had somehow made the air dusty. He muttered under his breath, "Another one, just browsing for fun, nothing more." Without hesitation, Richard set his cup down, straightened his lapel, and strode forward like a prosecutor about to deliver a verdict. His signature half-smirk appeared, the one employee secretly called the exit smile for unqualified customers. "Excuse me, sir." Richard's voice was as cold as sharpened steel. "Tiger Crest is a showroom and a provider of premium products. We only serve customers with prior appointments and the means to experience our offerings." The man paused, glancing at Richard briefly. His eyes were deep, like a late autumn lake, calm yet making one hesitant to look too closely. He didn't respond, nor did he show anger. He simply remained silent and continued browsing the clubs, an action that only irritated Richard further. Emma had been watching from nearby. She saw the brief flicker of darkness in the man's eyes before he quickly returned to his composed demeanor. A pang tightened in her chest. She didn't know who he was, but her instincts told her this was no ordinary man. "I apologize for the misunderstanding." She stepped forward, positioning herself subtly between Richard and the man. "Please feel free to browse. If you play right-handed, I can recommend some of our new lightweight titanium carbon clubs, very popular among senior players." The man paused, then looked up. A rare, kind smile crossed his face, the kind that made Emma feel she had done the right thing by stepping in. Richard clenched his teeth and cut in. "Emma, let me handle this. Not every visitor is suited for our store." Emma kept her gaze on the man, ignoring Richard completely. "Which course do you usually play at, sir?" "Some clubs are designed for specific terrains." The man tilted his head slightly, studying her before replying in a low but steady voice. "Pebble Beach. But now, I need something lighter. My grip strength isn't what it used to be." Richard let out a short laugh. "Pebble Beach? You know that place? Only million-dollar members are allowed in." Emma didn't turn around. Instead, she guided the man toward the Morrison Collection, an elite line of clubs with only 10 sets in existence worldwide. The moment she mentioned it, a peculiar gleam flickered in the man's eyes. "Does this store carry the first edition model?" he asked. Emma blinked. Very few people knew about that edition, and even fewer asked about it with such familiarity. "Have you tried that model before, sir?" she inquired. The man smiled again, but this time it was no longer a warm smile. It carried something deeper, nostalgia. "I designed the club head for that model, the name Morrison Boost. I was the one who named it." His words struck the air like lightning in the midst of Tiger Crest's polished luxury. Emma froze. Memories flashed through her mind. An article from Golf Today mentioning a legend. Tiger Woods. A man who had conquered the greatest tournaments, not just with talent, but with his technical expertise. The former chief architect of the very first Morrison project. She looked at him again. Tanned skin, tall and lean build, eyes weathered by experience. She stammered. You're Tiger Woods?" The man lifted the brim of his cap slightly, revealing a face that had once graced countless magazine covers. No confirmation was needed. A single nod was enough. Richard stood frozen. His face paled. His eyes blinked erratically. Every sneer, every condescending glance from earlier now reflected back at him like a cruel mirror, laying bare his arrogance and narrow-mindedness. Tiger gently set the club back on the display rack, as if returning a fragment of his past. He looked at Richard, not with anger, not with resentment, but with the weary sorrow of a man who had once believed in people and had been disappointed. "If an old polo shirt makes me unworthy of being welcomed here, then perhaps this place isn't meant for people like me," Tiger said slowly, each word cutting into Richard's pride like a razor. And at that very moment, the glass doors turned again. The sharp clack of heels echoed across the glossy wooden floor, accompanied by a fierce female voice. "Tiger Woods rejected? Here?" The entire store seemed to freeze. Ava Stone entered like a storm of crimson in the midst of a downpour of prejudice, ready to sweep away the last remnants of hypocrisy lingering in this store. She turned her camera toward Eager, a proud smile on her face. "Do you remember? Back then, when I almost quit after my wrist injury, you were the one who adjusted my grip and got me back in the top 5 in just 3 weeks. And now I refuse to stay silent when someone like you is humiliated, just because you aren't wearing the right uniform for these self-proclaimed elites." Eager said nothing. He simply gave Ava's shoulder a small, reassuring squeeze, a silent way of telling her, "I'm okay." But Ava wasn't done. She had been live streaming long enough for hundreds of viewers to flood in. Comments poured in. "Unbelievable. I can't believe this is Tiger Crest. This store just lost everything because of their arrogance. Eager Woods will always be a legend." And then Keanu, the owner of the Tiger Crest chain, walked in. He had seen almost everything through the store's internal cameras. Standing next to his assistant, Keanu remained silent as the events unfolded before him. But the moment Ava ended the live stream, he stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Richard. "You didn't just turn away a customer," Keanu said, his voice low and sharp as steel. "You just turned away a living legend in this industry. And more than that, you rejected the very value Tiger Crest stands for, respecting people, no matter how they appear." "Keanu, I didn't know. I didn't think. If I had known it was him," Keanu raised a hand, cutting him off. "And if it wasn't him, would you still have the right to humiliate them?" Richard fell silent. Ava stood next to Eager, arms crossed. "I think I need to have a word with Morrison about their brand representation in this store." At last Emma spoke, softly yet with unmistakable clarity. "Customers come here because they love golf, not to compete in a fashion show." Silence filled the room. Keanu turned to Richard one final time. "You no longer belong at Tiger Crest. Leave." Richard said nothing. He simply bowed his head, gathered a few personal items, and walked out of the store, without a single farewell. Emma turned to Eager, her voice quiet. "I'm sorry for everything that happened." Eager smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "It's all right. What matters is, you did the right thing." Ava chuckled, patting Emma's shoulder. "This girl gives me a little hope for the future of customer service." Keanu stepped forward, extending his hand toward Eager. "Thank you for coming, and thank you for not losing your temper." Eager shook his hand, firmly, decisively. "Respect isn't something I demand," he said. "It's something people choose to give." And in that moment, no one doubted it. Tiger Crest Golf had been reborn, not through branding, but through the character of people like Eager, Emma, and those who dared to stand up for what was right. No one in the store spoke, but their eyes said everything. A few VIP customers who had previously ignored Eager now looked at him with quiet embarrassment. Some turned away, while others nodded in admiration. But everyone understood. They had just witnessed something rare. A moment where prejudice was overturned, not with defiance, but with kindness and silence. Emma remained standing, still struggling to grasp the enormity of what had just happened. She was just a sales associate, often scolded for being too soft, for getting too emotional over poor customers. And yet now, she was the one a golf legend had entrusted with one of his most personal orders. Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking just loud enough for her to hear. "No one can teach true empathy, Emma. You have it." Emma gave a small nod, then immediately reached for her notebook, carefully noting down Eager's requests, as if handling an order for royalty. But in her heart, she thought of something much simpler. She was taking care of someone who had once been hurt by narrow-mindedness, just like so many others. At that moment, another employee, Tom, who had often followed Richard's lead, stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. Woods, I apologize for not welcoming you properly earlier." Eager turned back, smiling gently. "Thank you. It's never too late to learn how to see people differently." His forgiveness lightened the atmosphere. The weight that had hung over the store slowly lifted, replaced by something warmer, like the first rays of sunlight after a long night of rain. A well-dressed older woman approached, smiling at Eager. "Mr. Woods, if you have a moment, could you sign this golf ball for my grandson? He's a huge fan of yours." Igor nodded and sat down on a leather chair by the counter, carefully signing the ball with steady strokes. Then, at the request of a few other customers, he signed a few shirts and clubs, taking the time to exchange a few words with each person, making them feel valued. At that moment, the store no longer felt like a retail space. It had become a place where people connected through kindness and understanding. Emma stood watching, an unfamiliar emotion welling inside her. For the first time in her life, she no longer felt too soft-hearted, as Richard used to accuse her. She felt right and validated by the very people she had quietly admired from afar. When the order was finalized, Keanu carefully invited Igor into a private office to sign the contract. But Igor simply shook his head, smiling. "No need for formalities. I trust the person handling my order, and that's enough." He turned to Emma, placing his hand lightly on her notebook. "Keep this copy as a memento. Every finished club isn't just a tool, it's a reflection of trust and how we treat others." Emma swallowed hard, unable to find the words. She simply bowed deeply, not out of respect for fame, but out of admiration for a man who had used grace and dignity to overcome judgment. Keanu stepped back, watching everything unfold, his eyes filled with a newfound belief. Inside, he made a quiet decision. Tiger Crest Golf must change, not just its management, but the way we see our customers, one person at a time. And so, in a place once thought to be nothing more than luxury and exclusivity, a seed of kindness had taken root, planted by the attentive gaze of one young saleswoman. Since that fateful morning, Emma's life had entered an entirely new chapter. No longer oppressed or belittled by Richard, she was officially appointed by Keanu as the regional executive assistant, responsible for training staff at newly opened Tiger Crest golf branches. But Emma did not let that success make her complacent. She realized something important. If she truly wanted to understand her customers, the people who love golf, she couldn't stop at just mastering sales skills. So in the evenings after work, Emma quietly enrolled in a basic golf course. She practiced swings, studied the rules, and even read books and watched documentaries about the history of the sport. Though her first swings made the coach chuckle, Emma remained persistent. "We cannot serve something well if we don't truly understand it," she reminded herself. One day, an older gentleman entered the store, well-dressed but distant in demeanor. He looked around, clearly with no intention to buy anything. In the past, Richard would have ignored someone like him, but Emma approached him and started a conversation with a simple question. "Do you prefer a fade or a draw?" The man froze for a moment. Then they started talking about clubs, about Augusta, about Tiger Woods. 15 minutes later, the gentleman purchased an entire set of premium clubs and accessories, items he had originally intended to just browse for fun. Emma smiled, not because of the sale, but because she knew she was getting closer to her goal. To understand and respect customers as individuals, not just as walking wallets. Golf for all, a movement beyond the game. After that game-changing conversation, the Golf for All movement spread, not only within the golfing community, but across various industries. Stories of kindness behind the scenes, from locker rooms to parking lots, from cash registers to clubhouses, began to surface more frequently. Tiger Crest Golf became a symbol of human-centered service, where employees were trained not just in skills, but in how to see and appreciate people. In her role as the foundation's ambassador, Emma traveled to rural schools, public golf courses, and junior tournaments. Everywhere she went, she carried with her the story of Igor Woods, not as a legend, but as an ordinary customer who had once been dismissed. She told children that true worth is not found in appearances, nor in bank accounts, but in how one chooses to act when no one is watching. Meanwhile, Igor Woods continued to visit Tiger Crest from time to time, sometimes just to have a coffee, sometimes to watch customers take their very first swing. He never needed honorary plaques or golden nameplates, because what he left behind was far greater than any award, a legacy of the right values. Ava Stone, the woman who had spoken out most fiercely that day, later shared in a television interview, "We don't need to wait until someone becomes a legend to show them respect. Sometimes miracles begin with a smile or a simple question like, How can I help you? And Keanu, the owner who had chosen to stand for fairness, later said, I didn't fire Richard because he disrespected a legend. I fired him because he disrespected a human being. A world defined not by borders, but by choices. We live in a world filled with invisible boundaries, between rich and poor, between glamour and simplicity, between fame and anonymity. But these lines do not define a person's dignity, a kind gaze, a selfless action, a decision to prioritize humanity over profit. These may seem like small choices, but they are the very things that shape the world we live in. Because in life, as in golf, you may not always land on the fairway, but if you keep your heart straight, you will never lose your way.